Greetings all, and welcome to the 13th episode of the V.T.P, or the Veteran Trainer's Perspective. Today, we are going to be taking a look at a series of establishments that have excited and frustrated players across almost the entirety of the Pokémon franchise and proven to be a staple that can challenge trainers and their luck more than any other place in the world. Today all, we are going to be taking a look at Safari Zones, and how they operate, the ultimate purpose in the games, how they affect the challenge of completing one's Pokédex, and how they have changed over time. To understand the purpose and importance of Safari Zones in the main series games, we first need to understand what exactly a Safari Zone is. In the simplest of terms, Safari Zones are special facilities that cover a large space of land used to store rare wild Pokémon for the purpose of being captured by those that enter through its gates. Typically, there is an up-cost service fee for those that wish to enter, and once inside, there is a limited amount of distance that people can walk, and a limited number of capture devices to use for catching Pokémon, and once either runs out, the game session is over, and payees will have to pay the fee again if they wish to re-enter into the park facility. The key difference that makes these areas really stand out though, is the fact that trainers are not allowed to use their Pokémon to actually battle and weaken any wild Pokémon that they come across. Instead, they can only use their wits, a few basic tools, and pure luck to try and grab something within the confines of a Safari Zone. So if one cannot battle the wild Pokémon in the zone, how exactly are trainers supposed to have a fair chance of being able to get something valuable from these facilities? Well, in every Safari Zone that operates under traditional rules, there are a few simple tools that can be used to push things slightly more in a trainer's favor. For one thing, while trainers are not able to bring their own capture devices into a Safari Zone, they are gifted with 30 Safari Balls, which have the same catch power as a Great Ball, so they are more effective than the standard Pokeball and thus give a bit of an added chance to actually capturing a Pokemon. In addition, trainers do not have to rely on luck alone in order to catch a Pokemon, as they can use bait and objects like rocks and mud to help their odds, which is important as, in Safari Zones, there's enough open space that wild Pokemon can flee whenever they want to, ending an encounter with them. Bait is used to help distract wild Pokémon and makes it more likely that they will stay longer within catching range. However, at the same time, the food gives them more energy, and this unusual energetic behavior can make it more likely for them to break out of a ball. Rocks and mud, on the other hand, work sort of like damaging attacks in that they hurt Pokémon for a bit, lowering their strength and confidence and making them easier to catch. However, on the same side, this can also make them mad and make it more likely for them to flee on sight. The use of these tools is imperative to making the most of one's Safari experience and getting the Pokémon one is looking for. Now, this is all well and good, but given that the lack of ability to weaken any wild Pokémon you encounter, even with these additions, makes it seem pretty unfair, most are likely asking why these areas are included in the games in the first place. Well, as far as I am concerned, I believe the answer to that is a two-pronged one: increasing difficulty and shaking up the game world. It is easy enough to weaken a wild Pokémon to the point where using a capture device on it is likely to result in a much more successful capture than just chucking them at full health. But if every battle was like this, it would probably get pretty stale and dull quickly. The Safari Zone forces players to throw away their traditional tool bag and try something different in order to get something nice, and there is more than enough incentive most of the time for doing so. While Safari Zones are often stocked with some common Pokémon from a region, they are also more often than not stocked with extremely rare Pokémon that might not be found in any other part of a region or might not even be truly native to the region to begin with. This presents an exciting prize for collectors, but it in turn forces them to switch up their tactics and hope that they can use the tools they are given to snag something nice for their collection. This adds a level of difficulty to the large task of actually completing the Pokédex and can add hours of game time to any game they are a part of, so it means that the player is likely more than getting their money's worth out of it from that perspective. It does make these areas frustrating to work with in many cases, but at the very least, players are given enough materials to make catching something rare possible, even if it might take many attempts and a lot of patience to make it happen. However, it is noted that the inclusion of these Safari Zones, from a realistic perspective, does do something to the regional Pokédexes that can make things harder for trainers looking to catch them all. It makes them larger. This might seem okay at first, but there's a big problem with this. These Pokémon are normally not native to the region, and in many cases that means that they cannot be found naturally in the world all of the time. So if that is the case, why are they included in the regional Pokédexes in the first place if they aren't native? This has always been a bit of a sticky wicket in terms of determining what creatures are and are not native to a location, and as a whole, it makes it much harder to actually understand the biota of a region when we've managed to introduce species that, while maybe in a closed-off area and not impacting the overall ecology of a region, are nonetheless altering data by being included in regional Pokédexes, forcing studies to account for creatures that shouldn't be there in the first place, and in honesty, really aren't. Why this practice has remained the same for ages is still something that has been hotly debated, but at least from a gameplay perspective, it is easy to understand why this is done as such, as it means that, if players really want to attempt the greatest challenge the main game can offer and actually complete their Pokédex, they will have no choice but to step into these facilities and try their luck at capturing some of the rare Pokémon that can be found in the region. Once again, this shakes things up and makes sure that players looking to really catch them all must change their tactics from time to time and make full use of the skills they have at their disposal as trainers. Now that we've taken the time to explain what Safari Zones are, their purpose and how they affect the games and game world in general, let's take a look at the different Safari Zones that have cropped up over the years and see how they have changed and evolved over time. The Kanto Safari Zone is the first that players of the series likely ever had the chance to experience if they played from the very beginning of it all. And as far as it goes for Safari Zones, it's pretty basic, with all the major features already described, but little else, minus the hidden machine for Surf in a deeper part of the facility that is needed for players to progress through the game. The facility is split into 4 main zones, each of which have a different selection of Pokemon that can be found in them for trainers to find and potentially capture. A lot of the rare wild Pokemon found here, proper to its closing, were indeed exclusive to the zone, and included such rarities as Scyther, Pinsir, Kangaskhan, Tauros, and Chansey. While it might not have a lot of bells and whistles to it, this is the first Safari Zone to ever be built, and while it may no longer exist, having been replaced long ago, it nonetheless set the standard for many other facilities like it into the far future. Sadly, due to a number of reasons, the Kanto Safari Zone was eventually shut down, and it was replaced by a facility called the PAL Park, which is more than one location in the world. Here, trainers are given access to a number of special balls called Park Balls, this particular model having a catch rate strength increased to that of a Master Ball, so they can never fail no matter what. The point of this place is for payees to come in with these devices and put on a catching show, catching Pokemon that have been imported from other regions, up to 6 at a time, and the different environments, speed, and rarity of the catches ultimately are used to determine some sort of berry prize for them for completing the show, in addition, of course, to getting to keep the Pokemon that they caught if they chose to. Later on, this was further expanded and the facility was converted into the Go Park, which from a real-world perspective is designed to allow interaction between the main series games and Pokemon Go, serving as the first official manner in which these two games were able to actually meet each other. While the limitations of the game mean that only Generation 1 Pokemon can be imported at this time, they can be imported at much more massive volumes compared to the PAL Park, and even used to participate in a catching minigame that rewards rare items to players when they export large numbers of a single species of Pokemon into the park. It is uncertain what future lies in store for this facility now, but given the fact that the bonds between the mobile and console games are now starting to seriously strengthen, it is likely that we will see more of these facilities spring up across the world as time goes on. After closing the Safari Zone in the Kanto region, the same man who built it decided to create a new Safari Zone on the coast of the Johto region, and the Johto Safari Zone offers up some important changes to the general formula. For one thing, there is no time limit based on steps, so trainers can enter and walk as much as they wish until they run out of Safari Balls to capture Pokemon with. Secondly, the facility houses 6 different zones to explore, each with different Pokemon that can be located and caught in them, but what makes them truly different is that, prior to actually entering into the catching area, trainers can use an automated system to switch between 12 different tile environments for the different zones to create a unique layout that can give them access to a number of zones that are not part of the initial sites they may have access to. Even further than this, specific items can be placed in these 6 zones in order to decorate them, but, more importantly, after one or multiple of these objects have been in an area for a given length of time, and the zone has been active for so long, they can cause new, more exotic species of Pokemon to start appearing in these zones, increasing the overall variety of Pokemon available even further. It is said by some that this is truly the pinnacle of Safari Zone versatility, and given how popular the park has proven to be, it can be understood why many host this opinion. It should also be briefly mentioned that there is something akin to a Safari Zone held in the National Park 3 times a week in the Johto region, the Bug Catching Contest. While trainers are allowed to use Pokemon to fight and weaken other Pokemon, they can only bring one, and they are stuck with only 20 Park Balls to use, which have the same power as a Great Ball in this particular scenario. As the name implies, this event sees the National Park get swarmed by Bug-type Pokemon, some being incredibly rare and only ever seen normally within these contests, and those that catch the rarest, strongest, and healthiest specimens will have the best chance to score enough points to win over other trainers and win a rare prize for their efforts, ultimately showing the format to be applicable and capable enough for modification to be used for a number of different efforts. The Hoenn Safari Zone was once very much like the original Kanto Safari Zone in its structure and rules, and followed everything in it pretty much to the letter. There were, however, two notable differences to how it operated. For one thing, while most trainers only had access to 4 different zones in the facility, for those that had entered the Hall of Fame and beaten the champion of the region, there were 2 extra areas that could be explored. These areas are interesting in that they contained Pokémon that were not part of the established regional Pokédex of the region, but were obviously part of the national Pokédex. Why they were not included as regional natives like the others seems to be down to politics alone, but at the very least, it gave the best trainers in the region a reason to stick around. The other major thing that helps to really make it stand out is the fact that, in the past, you could actually use Pokéblocks made from berries as bait by inserting them into special feeders dotted around the facility. These were used to attract Pokémon of certain natures to those hunting for Pokémon, and thus could be used to not only attract rare Pokémon, but also potentially keep ones that have a nature that likes that particular type of bait from readily fleeing. However, all of this really came to a close some time ago when funding was cut to the Safari Zone for unknown reasons. Today, the place still exists, but it is completely open and free, and trainers can capture Pokémon there the same they would in any other location they went to in the region. In the Sinnoh region, their Safari Zone is known as the Great Marsh, and it is a special wetland habitat that is home to many species of wetland-dwelling Pokémon that are not found elsewhere in the region, as expected. But much like those that followed the Kanto Safari Zone, it has 6 areas instead of 4, and while each contain mostly the same Pokémon, there are some small differences between the different sections of the marsh, which may require the use of a tram in order to access. The Pokémon found here can prove to be quite powerful and useful in the right circumstances outside of their general rarity, but it is noted that this facility also adds in a special daily Pokémon to the areas that can be spotted and located with binoculars from outside of the facility, and these can include some rare species that are normally not found in any other part of the region, perhaps not even in the regional Pokédex. This helps to add a great degree of variety to the area and helps to make it the pride of Pastoria City, and definitely not a place to pass up if you're looking for marsh-dwelling Pokémon to either complete your Pokédex or use in serious competition. Lastly, within the confines of the Kalos region, there is a special type of safari called the Friend Safari that works more understandably from a real-world perspective than it does at an in-game perspective. Here, people that are registered as friends on a game system can grant access to special pens in the facility that houses one or several types of rare Pokémon, depending upon the degree to which these friends have interacted with each other on a number of factors. There can be up to 3 different Pokémon available in each friend's Friend Safari, split depending on what type they are, and they tend to be rare Pokémon that are either hard to or nearly impossible to come by under normal circumstances. Aside from this, there are several reasons to come here, as not only do players have a much higher chance of encountering shiny Pokémon in Friend Safaris, but the Pokémon found there are guaranteed to have at least 2 perfect IVs, and there is the potential for them to have their hidden ability, making it a lucrative effort to explore as many different Friend Safaris as possible to acquire the rare and valuable Pokémon contained within. As it can be seen, Safari Zones come in many different formats and can be found in many different locations, but they can all often challenge players to play the main games in a way that is different from what they are used to, and use that to make the gameplay experience much more interesting as a whole. They might not all be appreciated by players, but I think that they do a good job of keeping things interesting and players invested in completing the Pokédex and proving themselves to be master trainers in at least some manner. Only time will tell what remains of these structures in the future, but for now, let's never forget them and keep players exploring them as we finish today's episode of the V.T.P and prepare for what the series itself has in store. Tune in and see for yourself. Thank you all for watching this video. It is always an honor to be able to speak with you all on the subject of Pokemon in a way that brings me great joy and happiness in my work. If you would like to keep tabs on past and future work, click that subscribe button, check out my work on DeviantArt, and don't be shy about following me on Twitter, where you can find pertinent announcements on upcoming work before it is officially posted. Links to both can be found in the video description. If you would like to support my work and help Miguel and I continue to produce more content for you and improve upon our presentation, please visit us at my Patreon page, which you can also find a link to in the video description. With that, I thank you for watching and I wish you well.